high school, Stephanie was an excellent student, but her first love was definitely music. But she didn't like music from her own generation. She liked older music. Music like Madonna and David Bowie.
All the strangers came today, and it looks as though they're here to stay.
She didn't just like the lyrics that they had. She liked the crazy costumes they wear and the way they wore their makeup. Early in high school, she used to alter her clothes and get online and try to find crazy makeup ideas. And at first, the other high school kids kind of just ignored her, just thought she was different. But then, it kind of turned. They started to pick on her. They started to call her names like freak and loser. Then they started saying more hurtful things about her looks, calling her bucktooth and that she had a big nose. This scarred her to this day. Stephanie, she went off to Tisch Art School in Manhattan, New York, a very prestigious art school. And she got even more creative. Her makeup got crazier. Being in art school, she found students that would help her sew costumes that were totally outrageous. And they would do it for free because they were college students and they were her friends. Also, the makeup artist wanted to practice because someday they would work on big name celebrities. Stephanie was in class one day and she could hear a couple kids talking about her behind her back. You ever get that feeling someone's talking about you? She could hear them talking. She turned around and they abruptly stopped. She thought this was weird, but didn't think anything of it. She went back to her dorm room and her roommate was there. And she told her what had happened in class. And the roommate looked at her and says, "I've got something to show you. Come over here." The roommate opened up her laptop and she pulled up a Facebook page. And Stephanie was trying to see what was going on. And as the page flipped open, she saw faces, smiles of her classmates and some people that she thought were her friends. But she started reading what it was. It was a hate group formed on Facebook about her. It was saying mean, nasty things about how she wasn't talented, that she was wasting her time, that she was never going to be famous. She was floored as she looked at the faces in the comments, making fun of her, laughing at her. She felt as low as you could feel. Can you imagine opening up a Facebook page and seeing that 10,000 people, your friends, and people you look up to, are making fun of you and saying that you're a loser? This scarred her to this day. This is a talk not about bullying. This is a talk about how people treat you when you try to leave them behind. In Hollywood, the bully is the stocky, tough kid who breaks your glasses and takes your lunch money. But in real life, bullies are your friends and usually your family. And the reason they are is because they're so insecure that you're going to get up, gain some skills, and leave them behind. They're so afraid of you leaving the social class and having no need for them anymore. Now, this is not a talk about how Stephanie used all this negative energy to overcome all. All of this negativity actually slowed her down. It almost stopped her. But she didn't give up. In case you didn't know, I'm talking about the one, the only, the iconic Lady Gaga. Stephanie, Lady Gaga, wasn't born exceptional, but she worked her way there. She used her 161 IQ, higher than Einstein's, practiced her music, practiced her performing, and went on to sell 200 million records. She won 13 Grammys, and her outfits got even wilder. And all the original people in college who used to do stuff for free, she brought them along too as a sign of loyalty. And guess what? they all got raises. But for me, the peak of her career is when she was the sole music act for the most watched TV show in America, the Super Bowl. You're listening to The Reengineered You. This is a podcast about self-empowerment and all the myths, lies, and misconceptions we tell ourselves. Then we use science and history to bust those myths and re-engineer a better you. I'm your host, Todd Laments, the extrovert.
And I'm the writer, researcher, and introvert, Joe Anthony, whose job it is to dig through the outer layer of no-duh on the internet. So we don't have an opening explanation of the episode right now. What would you say the episode is about in like a couple of sentences? Because we went back and forth on this.
Oh God, it's hard because we talk about different things. I think is it good to be like everyone else socially, or is it good to be an outlier?
Right. I think that actually hits it on the head very nicely because right. My gist of this episode and the reason why we asked this question is, Lady Gaga got bullied because she stood out and got eccentric and started doing things in a school and time and place where it was better to sort of lay low and put in your time. And honestly, that might be the title of the episode when we're completely done. Is the episode title could be "Lay Low and Do Your Time." It's safer and you'll get promoted. But be eccentric, take huge risks, and you might get
Huge
billion-dollar
rewards.
deals. Yeah.
Yeah.
For the vast majority of people listening, the lay low and be risk averse, that's going to pay you in life more often and more securely than taking risks. So we're basically, this whole episode is risk assessment for someone like Lady Gaga or somebody who wants to break out of the box. Am I getting all this right? Because there's a lot here.
Sounds good to me. Yeah, sounds
Okay.
real good.
And we have 3 myths for this, and these are myths that are basically going to be going through Lady Gaga's story in life and trying to bust myths about what she did right.
Myth 1, according to movies, TV, and every Stephen King novel ever, bullying happens when a big tough kid is secretly scared of their home life and they're lashing out to get control. But what if that's not the case most of the time? Myth 2, doing wild makeup, dressing strangely, being eccentric, it's just a put on. There's no way it's a real reflection of your talent or how people perceive your talent, right? Myth 3. So let's get to the mother of all workplace myths. Do jobs promote people because they go out of their box, upskill themselves, and break out of the mold? Or do companies purely promote based on tenure? Seriously, guys, seriously? We're going to get to our myths, but first I want to tell Joe about a time when I was bullied, lightly, for trying to break out of my mold.
Speaking of wearing eccentric clothes, or just wearing clothes that are beyond your station, beyond your norm. If you are a auto mechanic, you have a choice of like coveralls, suspenders with your jeans or pants, and there's a very sort of like archetypical image in our mind, no matter who you are and what you do. If you work a business job, we expect you in polo shirts and button ups and things like that. Could you talk about the story you shared with me about dressing higher than your station?
Yeah, I worked my first, I guess you'd say, job, career, whatever it was. I worked in car sales. I sold cars, and I really wanted to become a manager. So I started talking to the manager and say, well, how do I become a manager? And they said, sell more cars. And then I sold more cars. And then they said, sell cars for more profit. So I did that. Then they started saying, well, you need to learn some of the things. So when the manager's gone, you work your days off, and for free, you work your days off and learn these skills. So when they leave, it'll be a smooth transition. And so when I started doing this, I started to go from the polo shirts and the slacks to dress like the managers did, which was I'd go out and get to the men's warehouse and get suits made. And what I noticed right away were first the salespeople started to kind of tease me. about, oh, look, he's got manageritis. He wants to be a manager. Look, he's GQ, he's dressing. And it bothered me a little bit, but I thought, oh, they're just immature. And they're pretty much, that's how they show that they like you. You know, they tease you or they're jealous that I'm going somewhere. But then the managers who were making these promises to me started teasing me and talking about how I dressed and the shoes I was wearing and my hair. And it made me feel pretty foolish, you know?
We usually tell people, like, the advice, the old advice I've heard is you dress for the job you want, not the one you have. And it seems really easy to accept that advice, to just be like, oh yeah, you know, I'll just dress better and I'll treat myself better, and it will signal to the outside world that I want to be in a higher position. But when you do it, you get you get pushback. I mean, like, with your sales team, what were they wearing? Were they all like in like polos and Dockers, and you're in a suit?
Yeah, I looked different. I definitely stood out. But it didn't look inappropriate for what I was doing for work, you know?
Right.
It wasn't Lady Gaga's meat suits or anything.
And I've seen people do this badly. Like, I've seen like younger guys who get suits that don't work well, or like they're it looks like they got their father's suit and it's like overstarched and blocky on them, and it doesn't fit. Todd does well with a suit. Like, I've if you've seen him or pictures on the website and he's wearing a suit, he looks very nice. So I just imagine this is purely well, them going after you for social class, for trying to move up or move down when they don't think it's appropriate.
And one thing similar to the Lady Gaga thing, where she was at the Tisch school, she was really floored by the fact that, or she must have been floored. I didn't talk to her about this, but she must have thought it was crazy that this big Facebook hate thing formed over a place that's a music school. So everyone there, Joe, is trying to get into music, right?
Right.
So that's a prerequisite for going there. And the same with, you know, being a salesperson. Everyone wants to go into management. They want to make more money. They want to have more responsibilities, or they want to have more power, I guess. They also used to tease me a lot about my sales training, that I liked to go to Toastmasters to get better at public speaking. That I listened to Anthony Robbins, or I used to listen to some other sales trainer. Now, why would managers tease me about honing my craft? I mean, have you ever ran into that in your writing stuff, that your friends or family have teased you about it?
Yes. I will say that some of it stuck and some of it was honest, and like, when I say honest teasing, I mean, like, I did a couple things that were kind of silly. Like, I kind of I grew my facial hair and shaved my head and things like that, to not just look older, but to just try to dress and act more mature. Because at the time I hadn't won anything, and so I wasn't being really taken seriously by the older authors. Like, if you're younger and you are, even if you're good, you're kind of treated as like, okay, yeah, you're an up and comer, but also you're like in the fantasy genre. Go play with the kids writing about Dungeons and Dragons, and don't bother us adults. We're busy with like historicals, or writing our memoirs.
They wouldn't say that to you. You just felt that?
Yeah, they actually did separate us into genres once, just to point out what the age groups of different genres were. So it was said out loud, but it was more of like a social experiment. But no, it's just the feedback. Like people, people very gently and lightly remind you where your class, or where your caste is, like where you should be, sort of like where your pool should be hovering, or your where you should be floating in the tank. Um, and that's when you talk about being teased at work, that's kind of what comes off to me as, is it's a light reminder of, you're looking like you're not in our social class. Why don't you come back a little bit? The blatant teasing, the Lady Gaga level of teasing, I don't think I've seen that in person in real life, unless it is specifically for somebody who is like flagrantly breaking the social contract of their social class. That actually might be the bigger issue. Is I don't think that 1,000 people suddenly deciding to hate Lady Gaga on a social media. First of all, that's wild. Like if 1,000 people all of a sudden decide to hate me now, I change my name. Like, that's
Yeah.
not even in college or in high school. That is, 1,000 people hating you is that's intense.
Well, I see this in the sports world a lot, and I think sports is a little easier than the arts because there are wins and losses. So the memes and then the players are all still on it. Some of the less of the coaches. Coaches are an older generation. They're not as sensitive to that because they're not as exposed to it. But the players really get a lot of hate tweets, and it affects them. It affects they'll freak out in interviews sometimes. The pressure you can kind of see it building. But with Lady Gaga or Taylor Swift, there's not wins or losses, right?
Right.
They don't bomb publicly like athletes do. Athletes, their failures are very exposed, and so people who have 2% as much athletic ability, like myself, can pile on them and say that they're junk.
Right. I I kind of want to get into like what this looks like in real life because I believe. Do you think Lady Gaga is exaggerating when she says 1,000 people? Like, it's possible she's not. I'm not going to say that.
Well, it's 10,000 people, and
Okay.
I don't know, but I think it must have felt like it.
Yeah.
There weren't that many kids in the school, so it would be hard for believe that she would have had the exposure that many people could hate her. Like it's possible now. That's easy. She could probably do 100,000 people, 1,000,000 people, but
Right.
right to make that many enemies, you have to have a lot of fans.
Well, we could talk about. I do have sort of examples in research and in life of what that looks like when somebody gets bullied or teased for changing their social class. Um, I think that possibly, and this is another pet theory of mine. There's a lot of these in this episode because we like rags to riches stories, and because so many of our best movies and TV and our tales we tell ourselves. A lot of our social media encourages rags to riches, climbing, striving, joining a new social group. I mean, like if you've seen the show Suits, it's about somebody who doesn't belong in a law firm, like who hasn't even passed the bar, like sort of tricking his way into it, but he's got an extreme ability. He's got like a perfect memory, and he goes literally from nothing to corporate law.
It sounds like the premise for Limitless, the movie book, right?
Right. Limitless is a great example. Like you can't throw a stone on Netflix without hitting a movie about what we're talking about, which is nobody around them thinks that they should be trying to go into the upper class that they are, and they do it anyway, and they get bullied. And we always sort of like shake our heads and say, well, that wouldn't really happen in real life. But honestly, it does. It's very, very common, and there's research about it. So we'll link off to the Time article about this. Time basically they were reporting on another set of research that was done at UC Davis by Robert Ferris, and they say in it that traditionally most bullying and still this hasn't changed, still most bullying happens to those who occupy the lower rungs of the social ladder. So basically the people who are lower in the social group, they're the ones that get bullied more often. And it's not totally out of cruelty. It's not Stephen King. Like we joked about Stephen King because every one of his movies is about a bully who is so much of a bully they're willing to like stab people and stuff. Like super bullies.
He talks about in his book, and I know you've read it, Stephen King on Writing, which is a wonderful book that I think everyone should read, whether you're an aspiring writer or not. But he talks about when there was a young woman when he was in school who dressed up, and she was from the very, 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 very poor part of Maine. And Maine is like a third world country. There's very rich and there's very, very poor. And that she dressed up and curled her hair and wore a nice dress one day and wore makeup, and that all the kids picked on her, and that he was not proud that he was one of them. He wasn't the worst, but he did. And he talks about on the ride home on the bus how she was so full of life and glowing in the morning, but at the end of the day, she was totally defeated, and she never ever tried again. It's a heartbreaking story, but it's a tearjerker,
Right. I don't remember what the Irish saying is, but I remember watching an interview with Bono, and they asked about like, do you get a big head doing this kind of stuff? And he's like, the Irish have a saying which is like, keep a dog down or something like that, and it basically means that if you're from a working class, you are encouraged not to go above that artificially. If you are obviously a genius to everybody, like if you are incredible at math, or you're like Goodwill Hunting, or you're like, you're so phenomenal, and you're so phenomenally skilled at something, like you're a chess wizard, people will encourage you to go up in class. But if you don't have that, if you're not wearing a sign basically that says I'm a genius, then people will try to temper your ambition, and they will try to temper your upclassing. And there is this research kind of backs that. They tracked 4,200 students, and this is low grades. This is 8th, 9th, and 10th grades, and they tracked them for a year. And what they did is they created a social map. Now they called it a bird's nest map, but Todd and I have done episodes on teams and social circles. And basically, it's like a node. Like, it almost looks like a chemical compound. And what that node usually looks like is you're in the middle, and then you have branches that go out toward other people, and you might have, 2 or 3 branches before you hit Lady Gaga, or 6 degrees from Kevin Bacon. In my social circle, I may have to ask Todd to ask one of his friends to get a hold of, like, somebody in publishing for me. And what they measured, these researchers, is the people with the shortest paths to the most students were given the highest ranks on the social scale, meaning they didn't have to go through many of their connections before they could reach everyone else. So they were the most connected, and they had the best bonds. They were the nodes of nodes, so to speak. Those students were given, high ranks. Those were the quote unquote popular kids, or the high social ladder kids. The surprise that the researchers ran into was that the kids getting bullied, they were getting bullied not only when they didn't fit in, like when we talk about somebody on the low social ladder, we don't think they deserve to go up the ladder because they are awkward. They don't have the right skills yet. They don't have the right social skills. They're not wearing a sign that says I'm the chess grand champion in the making. But they were also bullied when they were simply trying to avoid being victims by going up the ladder. So if you are what Todd is talking about, the girl who dresses and curls her hair and dresses very nicely and tries to, like, artificially move up the social ladder, if it's viewed as that, if it's viewed as this sort of, like, suddenly they're moving up the ladder, they get bullied more. And they get bullied more because it seems like it's undeserved, for one. And for two, once they reach the top of the social ladder, they're untouchable. And that's what this research bared out too. It said boys and girls who began their year in the 50th percentile, so the middle, if they moved to the 95th percentile, the chances they were targeted for aggression went up by 25%. And as their social status increased, the involvement in aggression, both as perpetrator and victim, also went up until they got to the very top. And then things started to reverse. So when you become Lady Gaga, when you get to the very top, the level and the amount of bullying you get goes backwards. People basically start leaving you alone and start accepting that you probably deserve to be at that level anyway.
That's interesting. So the ones who are just the prince and princesses who don't have a lot of roadblocks, they're left alone.
Yeah, that's what I can tell from this research. The ones that made a 50 to 95th percentile jump, those are the ones that face the most.
You think there'd be some
kickback.
resentfulness about that group because right, their dad got them in. Of course, he's good at sports. He's 6'6", right?
Right.
What I did notice and I was a very popular high school student, I was definitely in the top percentage of whatever it was. What I did notice, though, because I wasn't always in that group, I moved up that group by changing schools and by some of the activities I did. Not superficially, but just worked on myself. What I did notice is that everyone in there was good at something, like really good. They were either really funny or really clever or good in grades or very attractive, but they're usually, it wasn't superficial. There was usually something that you could grasp onto, or really hardworking, or you know what I mean?
Right. I wonder if that is, this was not in the research. I'm not suggesting this, but I am thinking that I wonder if it goes back to, do we feel like they deserve to go up in social status or not?
Or do you
If
think it's just that they feel comfortable that all these other kids have those exact same abilities and personality traits? They're just kind of not confident enough to go out there for obvious reasons. They don't want to be attacked. I mean, because as a kid, you're very insecure anyways, but there's a
yeah,
reason for that. Because you're in a school with a bunch of mean kids. Now, a lot of times when people like Joe have these very, very high IQs, what they use that as a shield, a social shield, right?
yeah,
Because school comes so easy to them, learning comes so easy that they can put all of their eggs in that basket. Rightfully so, right? They're already talented in that. So I thought that was interesting that even though she's this genius, she doesn't have to use what she's blessed with, and that IQ was earned and born with that high IQ. An IQ of 161 is very. It shocked me. Miley Cyrus's has an IQ of 120.
yeah.
That surprised me, and I just thought, well, that's interesting. That's not what they love. That's not what their genuine interest is. Yes, they're incredibly intelligent, but they don't have to just be academics and intellectuals.
There's always lists online of like celebrities with surprisingly high IQs. I've always kind of wondered if like maybe that is part of it is to be successful in the first place on that level. You get a lot of celebrities who are accidental celebrities where like they had the right look, they had the right tone, they had the right feel, but they're only good at a couple of movies and then they kind of fade away. I wonder if those are like, I don't want to pick anyone, but the dummy celebrities. I wonder if the ones that stick around are sticking around specifically because they also have that IQ.
I think so, because that's their limitless, right? They just
Yeah.
keep working. They have to keep filling in. When you're smart, you're hungry for more, to learn and improve.
When you see somebody like Lady Gaga or like, oh crap, who did the song Rocket Man? Elton John.
Elton John, yeah.
Yeah. When you see a Lady Gaga or an Elton John and they're like as eccentric as the day is long, they are very, very eccentric. Does that indicate skill to you? Because I wonder if these other kids were making fun of Lady Gaga just because she was like substituting substance with flash.
Yeah, I do. I think it does. I think it's when you're younger, it's very, this is my street psychology. You really are drawn towards people who like the same kind of music, like the same kind of food, like the same movies, because it makes you feel like you're okay, right? And then when you get older, you realize the value in being a different height, a different race, speaking different languages. You want to kind of fit in and be average for a lot of your life. But if you can, I see it as being as thinking outside the box and being creative.
Yeah. I assume that because I went to school specifically for art, but I think that there's we have research about the subconscious assumptions of eccentricity, but part of it comes with we have subconscious assumptions about value when it comes to like okay, well I'll kind of just start here. We value things when they fit the mold of something that is appeared valuable before. For example, everybody likes old headphones, like the old sort of like. Do you remember having like the huge stereo system that sat in the middle of the hallway, and it's like it's almost the size of its own entertainment set. You go up there and you plug in like an actual physical plug and put on like these giant head cans and
yeah, you have to move. You can't move it. It's just it's like part of the furniture. It's just,
right.
yeah.
Well, we have AirPods now. We don't need those, but we still have a subconscious preference for heavier audio equipment. Beats by Dre, somebody took those apart and found out that they are made artificially 30% heavier with metal parts just stuck in there because heavier makes us associate it with quality. And that's not just for Beats by Dre. That's like a lot of a
Isn't
lot
that
of objects
crazy?
are made artificially heavy. Yeah.
I never think of that because you think of now we're in the era of clouds, right?
Right.
We want everything to not even be seen, and then but that's still we still have that in our DNA. That's funny.
Right. But we're like, yeah, it makes us think it's sturdy. You mentioned at the beginning episode, this study also talked about how if you put a bunch of subjects in a room and you ask them, do you like this rap music? They'll say yes or no. Or do you believe it's high skilled? They'll say, it is or it isn't. But if you reveal or artificially tell them this rap was made by a white rapper like Eminem, this rapper was made by a black rapper, in controlled music sample tests, they found out that people have a preference or at least say that the rap is better when it is a black rapper. And like all of these other examples, artist eccentricity is in fact linked to people thinking that the art is better. So
Isn't that
if
funny? Like
yeah.
you see, the one that pops out to me was Macklemore, the rapper,
Oh yeah?
because because when you saw him, or let me say the first time you saw him, I know I thought he was black. I was shocked that he wasn't.
Right.
And it was because he was so good. I thought, "Oh, he must be." So, and I saw him and he looked so very white. He looked like, you know, he didn't look anything or act anything like Eminem. Not anything like that.
That's that I think now that I'm thinking back on my first realization about Macklemore, I think you're correct. But this goes across the board for everybody. If you don't uh, um we have expectations. It's archetyping or stereotyping. It is we have expectations for what quality should look like from a certain type of creative or a certain type of like a high performing person. Andy Warhol, the guy that drew paintings of soup cans in grids and like painted Marilyn Monroe and painted all this like kind of um, paintings that made fun of commercialism. He was so eccentric. Like he was like one of the most eccentric painters there were. Um, okay, so I'm gonna stop beating around the bush and I'll get to sort of like our main study about this. There was a study that came up that called it the Lady Gaga effect, which made my research very easy. I was looking for research that pointed out that proved that Lady Gaga was let's say not overvalued because of her eccentricity, but that she uses the eccentricity as a signal for her art.
Yeah, she's so
Um,
visible. So she was named after this, right?
right. Um, so what they found is they did a study where they took a Van Gogh painting, like sunflowers, and they presented it to people, and they would tell them either no information at all, like this is either they tell them this is Van Gogh or this is nobody, and they'd ask them how much they like the sunflowers painting. And then they had experiments where they would just tell them that the artist had cut off his own ear and not associated with Van Gogh. They would just tell them, this guy lopped off his ear while he was painting, and it was an eccentricity of theirs. Um, and then they would also read short bios of fictional artists, and basically what they found out very quickly was that if the artist was considered very eccentric or was rated as very eccentric, they also rated the artwork higher. Um, and this was a study by Ego and Van Tilburg. Um, we'll link off to their research. It's very interesting. But they also did this with Lady Gaga specifically, which was really tricky. Like a lot of people know who Van Gogh is, that's obvious, but they realized that if they did a test and they just asked everybody, "Hey, is Lady Gaga talented?" Everyone's going to say yes or no because they're going to come in with preconceived notions. So instead, they made biographies about an artist, and they said this was a singer who wore tight black suits, black gloves, large shiny masks, or they would say this is an artist who showed up in a meat suit like you mentioned, or this is an artist who they would name things that Lady Gaga had worn, or they would simply show a picture of her seated in no makeup, simple black dress, hair in a ponytail, nothing eccentric about her. And obviously, and of course, anytime she appeared eccentric, her art was given higher ranks. They gave her more respect. Now, there was one little tiny caveat to this that I found kind of made all the difference and was very interesting to me. If they primed the test takers to think about marketing first, if they said in their fake bio, if they said, this artist, has been accused of using these as stunts for marketing, for marketing ploy. If they primed the test takers with that knowledge that it could be a marketing thing, it changed their perspective. They did not rate the art higher. They did not rate the artist higher. They rated it pretty much on average. So if you make people think of marketing first, if you make people think it might be a put on, even if they think it changes their perception of it. And that makes me think of Lady Gaga at her school. If one student says this is flim flam, this is marketing, this is fashion over substance.
That makes total sense to me. Okay, keep going.
Yeah, and then everybody else has the same thought in their mind, and suddenly that eccentricity, the dressing up to get the promotion, that goes away. It's somebody has primed everybody else to think negatively or to think that it is just a shtick, and then
Well,
you're back to prove it.
that's what I was thinking too, because I think that we've all been fooled by thinking someone's more interesting than they really are, but based on their appearances sometimes, right? So I think that maybe Lady Gaga's talent, it wasn't developed at that time. It was still in its infancy. So her probably talent didn't match up with her looks yet.
Yeah.
But she wasn't going to wait for that. She was going to, you know what I mean? Which I respect because she knew where she was going. She just, right? I mean, because it takes a long time to get good at what the things that she's doing.
Right.
Performing is a lifetime of work, and you're not going to be as good in high school as you are when you're,
Well, that's exactly what I'm saying. Is if you are in life wearing a sign that says "I'm a genius," that's how good your talent is. Like we have you seen the show The Queen's Gambit about chess?
Yes, I have.
Such a good show, but in the story, in the actual like literature in the book, and she's like 5 or 6. She is like she's not even a teenager when she is beating adults and grandmasters in chess. Like when we say somebody wearing a sign that says "I'm a prodigy, I'm a genius," that is as big of a sign as you can have. But that's not most geniuses. Most geniuses really do have to work at it. Like there are Gladwell and also John, or was it Robert Greene, who wrote Mastery. Like all these people who have done serious research find that you really aren't a genius until you dedicate a serious amount of time. Like the 10,000 hours is thrown around. It's less, honestly, if you have a lot of natural talent, but you still have to work at it. And you're still going to go through that phase of you're dressing for a job that you don't have, and you're dressing for something that people don't think you have the talent for quite yet. Like you haven't proved yourself. You're not wearing that sign yet.
Why, as Americans, are we so impressed by people that things come easy to? You know what I mean? Isn't that the weirdest thing?
It is. We had an episode about genius once where we there's the Greek phrase that you have a genius, that it is like a devil on your shoulder influencing one very small skill of yours, that it's not everything you do. And we love people who are naturally talented for some reason.
Well, yeah, the Queen's Gambit. I remember how worked up I got about that. Just thinking that's just so cool. This little girl's beating all these people. When you were talking about it, I got that feeling in my chest again. I'm like, oh, yeah, that's awesome. Why wouldn't I respect the person that's done it and finally peaked in their 50s and finally winning, who's done all this hard work and paid all these dues, and everyone told them that they should have quit, and
Right. We just did an episode about Michael Jordan, and talk about natural phenoms that got the right kind of coaching. And yeah, and he would tear down people who were working at it, like people who were very, very good but had to work for it. And I don't know why that is about us in particular. I don't know if it's human nature or Americans, that we love natural talent over somebody who is working at it. But the good news is, people kind of have short memories about your skill set. If you work very hard at something and get very good at something, people will kind of assume you're natural. That's another phenomenon we've covered in other shows, where like if you're Lady Gaga and people in college remember you being gawky and awkward and not being a terrific singer but being really good, You're not a genius. You're not wearing that genius sign yet. So they're going to make fun of you for dressing out of turn. But fast forward 10 years, we're laughing about it because, like, one, who cares what they think, and two, they may not even remember it that way. There are so many celebrity encounters where, like, J.K. Rowling talks about how people she makes fun of in her book or modeled villains after, they literally don't know it's them because, you know, they're just like, oh yeah, no, I knew that person. They were always going to be good. Like they remodel history in their own mind to give you that genius sign, when in reality they were trying to give you those little nudges and teases to keep you in your what they thought was your own social class.
So if you had a baby Joe who was 10 years old and a prodigy of writing, okay, and just obviously just very, very intelligent, would you teach little baby Joe to hide his talents, to protect himself from the negativity that, because, you know, we talked about in the speech in the beginning about Lady Gaga was in therapy about this. It really did scar her, and it almost stopped her from just giving up from that much negative. And I wouldn't have blamed her if she did, but probably more people than not have quit. So should you promote along the same as you work, or should you wait and just be da da da?
I have very frequently wondered about this. Do you need to go through that period to get the thick skin to continue whatever you're talented in, or is it better to, like, shelter somebody? If there is if we're, like, talking, like, serious time travel here, I would have, like, benefited from a tiger mom. Like, I would have benefited from a coach or somebody who sat me aside and said, "Get serious about this thing. You're gonna love it. It's gonna be the thing you do endlessly, and we'll never get tired of it. But you got to hone and you got to work on it. And here's the resources." It's about yeah.
100% of the people in my boxing from all the years, the guys that made it all had boxing dads. Every single one of them, or a boxing mom, the tiger mom. They all did. There's no exceptions. I don't. And they say, oh yeah, no, 100%, because the parent didn't give up. The kid gave up a million times, but the parent wouldn't let him. You know.
Right. I think that's true. I think that the first the parent probably gets into it themselves and is good at it because they put in the time. But the prodigy or the genius, you know, the child genius is going to be their kid, because that parent who really, really, really tried and got decent, mediocre, okay,
Yeah.
they became a professional that was moderately paid and modestly treated. Right. They're going to have the genius kid that they, you know, they teach all the skills too. Yeah, they know all the hacks.
They know what to avoid. They know the pitfalls, and then they can. And what's funny is those same boxing sons or daughters who grow up to be the champions resent their parents. They put them in this spot, you know. Right. Like they really didn't need them to get there. When just what you just said, just 100%. It's so obvious, you know.
Yeah, I think that developing talent is one of the most fascinating things on earth, and the idea of, like, yeah, people spotting Lady Gaga and being like, treating her like that Stephen King story, that is so fascinating. And really, I don't know, I think we should appreciate more people who are hard workers for a talent. But again, like, it's risky. Like, let's talk about the other side of this, which is, if you encourage somebody who doesn't actually have the drive or talent and doesn't have the thick skin enough to push forward, one, they are going to run into catastrophe when they don't make it, or they don't hack it, or they have to give up on another something. Or two, what are the social risks that you promote somebody in your group and it doesn't pan out? Like, if we rewind to school, and we all knew the awkward kids that couldn't really, like, they said the wrong things, they were inappropriate, they did not speak well, like they you know, they didn't have the talent yet to, like, even really, like, they weren't good networkers early, they didn't have the soft skills, and they wouldn't until college or later. If you put your reputation on the line and you know, not just let that person sit at your lunch table, but you push them to be part of the upper social group, and they absolutely humiliate themselves, and you too, that's a huge risk. Like, we don't talk about, you know, I'm not promoting bullying here. I'm just saying that, like, there's a reason why this is kind of built into our nature, and that it statistically bears out for, you know, other groups. There's
that's
a lot
interesting.
to be,
I never thought of it like that, but that's true, because when you bring that kid to the party with you, or you bring them to the football game or anything, and they do stuff like that, and it does alienate you too, that you are very few kids are popular enough, especially in their own social class. Nobody is really. Nobody's safe from
Right.
getting kicked out. You might have to go. You might get demoted with them.
I've definitely had the experience of like I will find somebody who like they're talented or they're interesting, and I'll bring them to like a party, or I'll bring them to a social group, or I'll invite them to a Toastmasters club, and then they start speaking, and holy crap, the stuff I didn't anticipate they would say, and the awkward stuff that they bring up, and yeah, like when they they bomb, or they say very inappropriate things or politically charged things, or they start sharing conspiracy theories about how we didn't land on the moon, then I'm like, oh my god, what have I done? Like I'm everyone's looking at me like, you brought this person here. Just imagine that, except somebody saying I want to be a singer, or yeah.
And I've had this happen in the corporate world, where I've brought over people who I've worked with before, who I had relationships with, who I trusted, that would dress up, show up, and do a phenomenal job, who have done poorly. And yeah, you don't lose your job when there's a bad hire, because you didn't hire them. And sometimes actually I did hire them. But it is embarrassing. And I know you lose points at work when you hire somebody who wasn't qualified, who you swear, who you put your name on there for, that was.
Well, you're kind of seen as like, somebody who can't read other people. And if you're in managerial positions, you have to be able to read people. So yeah, there's a lot of risk. And I know that the first half of this episode is about saying, what about these dummies that didn't see that Lady Gaga was going to be amazing? But it is in our nature to try to not take that social risk of putting somebody else up the ladder and watching them fall back down and take us with them. But okay, so what's the safe version of that? How do we promote people? Like we're not promoting people who dress up and show up and upskill themselves, go out of their comfort zone, learn new things, become very creative.
Let me start this one off,
please,
because this is something I've talked about for years. I've wrote speeches about it, and I'm saying it's not about your tenure, it's about talent. And I've always felt that way, and I've always noticed that people who will pound on their chest and say, I've been here for 18 years, but it doesn't show, Joe. It feels like the first day. And the people who just go to work and, the people who promote themselves the most at work are usually the people that have been there the longest, not the people that do the best job.
Yeah. I 100% buy that. And I went looking for research to back that up. Have we talked about the Peter Principle on this show?
Remind me.
I don't think we have, but it's very well known in just management and business. The Peter Principle is that the person that gets promoted because they're good at a thing. Like if you are the best salesman on the floor, year in and year out, you eventually get promoted to management. But the problem is, you didn't just prove yourself to be a good manager, you proved that you were a good salesman. Now you're suddenly being promoted to a totally different skill set. Freakonomics had an episode about this where police officers were getting promoted because they're really good police officers. But being a police chief or a lieutenant or a captain, that isn't a policing position. That is a managerial.
More like a political position, right?
It is, yeah. It the higher you go, the more it becomes almost political entirely in nature, and managerial, and like with smatterings of economics and math and like sociology. So like, yeah, it's a totally different skill set. But the Peter Principle is you will be promoted to the position of your incompetence. Basically, is you'll be promoted out of your skill set eventually, and you'll be promoted to a position you're unready for.
And it's such a different thing chasing people with your car with a gun than it is organizing and managing and meetings. And
right.
You can see why. And the same with sales. If let's just say selling cars is very different from managing a car dealership. It is not the same thing.
Right. And the idea that if you stick around long enough and you just perform moderately well, you will eventually just collect your promotion and get put on the higher end of the ladder, and you'll make more money. That's all very true. We're not going to dispel any myths with that one. That's just how our our current system works, especially our corporate system. I was going to ask this as a question. If you haven't happened to look at the doc, what percentage do you think of managers are chosen purely by tenure, not by talent, not by Lady Gagaing themselves, dressing up, upskilling themselves, just
I'd say
tenure?
40%.
My original guess was about half. I went a little bit higher, and I was like, half the bosses I've ever had, they were there because they just stuck it out and they didn't make waves, and they just eventually became the bosun of the ship. According to Gallup, Gallup polls did a article about this and a bunch of really robust studies. It's about 82%.
82, that's most.
Yeah. So 82%.
A majority, a vast majority.
A vast majority of managerial roles are selected for tenure. And I'll just read the quote here. And this is the reason why this came out is great. I'll share that first. The Washington Post was working on a report and a proposal about how we promote government workers. So they were trying to lean up or make government work more lean, and they're trying to like analyze how they promoted their people. And it was aimed at the Department of Defense, which is also funny because like you think like the rank and file is the little definition of merit-based promotion. And they were looking at how much is tenure-based promotion a thing, how big of a problem is that, how could they make promotion more efficient. This is by Gallup. They said, quote, the two most frequent reasons U.S. workers are promoted to managerial are tenure with the company and success in a non-managerial role, like we said, the Peter Principle.
That'd be like saying you're gonna make you an NBA basketball player, but you never play basketball. You're a great baseball player.
Yeah. Oh, it's how many great players become managers and then wreck the team because they're not good managers.
That's scary.
Yeah.
And especially with the Defense Department, where you think they wouldn't recognize talent if they, you think in the government, you think they don't have any kind of, they don't have any Lady Gagas. Okay, Joe.
Right. So it's kind of a mind blower. Like I'm still kind of shook about this because in my brain, like Napoleonic military is where we were supposedly getting away from royalty and nobility being the markers of who you promote, and we kind of accidentally drifted into a system where just tenure, it's all about tenure and how long are you come in with the qualifications, even if it's just barely, and then if you just sit there long enough, you eventually get promoted. I think that is a slightly worse system, and it's still not a merit-based system. That is also the reason why doctors are usually more efficient if they are younger. A lot of people don't trust young doctors, but there have been studies that show that younger doctors are usually better performers, like in ER in emergency situations and also diagnoses, because they are more up on the literature. They've read the most recent stuff.
The most recent stuff they studied the most recently, as opposed
Yeah.
to people who, well, we've done it this way. You can see someone getting, well, I've been doing this for 30 years, and then
An old country doctor who hasn't been keeping up on their stuff. And
who gets all their education from the drug reps. Absolutely.
Yeah, go ahead.
I have a burning desire, and we talked about this before, the economics of love and success at work and your relationships. And I'll tell you why. A lot of this tenure thing comes around a lot of times. A lot of turnover in companies is because people can't afford to stay in the game long enough to get promoted. But the ones with supportive spouses or partners, they can afford to comfortably go to work and work stressless because the income is not as much on their day-to-day life as it is on somebody who has to, make a go of it on their own.
Right. So you're saying like somebody who desperately needs that promotion so they can cover the cost of their commute and their medical bills and all that other crap, and
It's going to
they're
jump. It's going to be
yeah.
more flighty, because they can only hold out. But when you have a secure partner at home,
And we don't respect people who are too hungry for it too. Like this kind of wraps into the whole same Lady Gaga ball, which is if you look too hungry for a promotion or to be in a upper ladder, we also think you don't deserve that. Like that's was it Pete's character from Mad Men? Like he was a imminently hateable character because he wanted so much to do something and be something that he wasn't yet. And we wanted the naturally good person who is the Don Draper character. So well, just so we don't leave it completely unsaid, Gallup followed this up by saying that there are 5 things that predict great managerial success, and it's not tenure. I don't know if that was too much of a spoiler, but
was that the thing? So this 82%, they're not doing well.
no.
What's the fail rate of this?
They didn't give an exact fail rate. This is still sort of an ongoing thing. Like we'll link off to the articles. There are multiple articles covering this, specifically centered around like the reports that came out of the Department of Defense and why promoting based on tenure is a bad idea.
But they're changing how they're doing it because of it. It's failing to the fact that it's not working anymore.
Exactly. Yeah. And in a society where we are constantly looking for basically like the most efficient way to run companies, the most efficient way to make profit, oftentimes the most efficient way to make those improvements is to look at how you're promoting people. And that's why like what is that, 18% of people who aren't doing it based on tenure, they're doing it well. Like that is oftentimes what is the difference between a successful company. They said in this Gallup study, they looked at 2.5 million managerial led teams in 195 different companies or countries. And they said that the highly talented managers who were not promoted based on tenure, who were promoted based on merit, they excelled at 5 things. And they're very short. They are motivating employees to take action and engage with compelling missions. So basically, give them a sword and a righteous cause. Exhibiting assertiveness to drive outcomes. Lady Gaga. they have a goal. They have they're trying to get an outcome. Creating a culture of accountability. Building relationships that create trust, open dialogue, and full transparency. That one is the one I've seen the least among managers that are brought up with tenure. I think often because they are trying to get away from transparency so that it doesn't look like other people could do their job, like they become defensive about their job. And then the last one is making decisions based on productivity, not politics.
Yeah, I'm with you on that, the full transparency one, which I don't understand. I think as a good manager, owner, whatever you are, you should want people to know how to do your job so you can delegate.
Right.
And build your successor, right? I mean, geez, you want to do this forever?
Right. And the obvious things that are missing on this list are staying with the company a really long time and taking shots at the people who are climbing the social ladder above you.